Night fell over Seoul with the slowness of an omen. The wind carried the bittersweet scent of rain and smoke, while the sky, covered in red clouds, seemed to reflect the fire of something that had begun long before that night. High on the hill, the Han mansion burned silently, engulfed in flames that danced like vengeful ghosts against the glass windows and white marble. Firefighters rushed through the chaos, but the fire seemed to have a will of its own, as if seeking to purify secrets hidden within those perfect walls. Amidst the flames and the intermittent glare of the spotlights, one figure remained motionless. Han Ji-won, the acclaimed CEO of Hanoul Group, the man who for years symbolized the untouchable success of the Korean elite. His dark suit was disheveled, his gaze distant, his expression too calm for someone who had just lost everything. Reporters called out to him, cameras surrounded him, but he remained silent, as if the fire were not a tragedy, it was liberation. And while the flames devoured every memory, a cold thought crossed his mind. Now, finally, nothing remained to reveal the truth. Inside the mansion, however, something resisted. Se-ra's law. His wife struggled to breathe. Between the fire and despair, she called out the name of the man she believed she loved, trying to reach the glass door that was melting in the heat. Each step was an act of faith, each cry a wound. When the roof collapsed and the world fell silent, Seoul believed it had witnessed yet another domestic tragedy, but fate knew that night was only the beginning of something much bigger. Hours later, while headlines hailed him as an exemplary widower, Ji-won displayed perfect tears before the cameras. But when the spotlights faded, a brief smile appeared on his face, a smile that concealed guilt or perhaps relief, because in the heart of the ashes, something still pulsed. And when the fire dies down, what will truly emerge, truth or vengeance? If this story has captivated you, from the very first second, subscribe now and leave a like to follow every revelation, because what comes after tonight will change everything. Before the fire, there was light. Years ago, Seoul applauded a wedding that seemed straight out of a modern-day fairy tale. Han Ji-won, the young tycoon, admired for his intelligence and strategic coolness, was united with the sweet and dreamy Se-ra's law, daughter of a music teacher from the countryside. Business magazines featured the couple as symbols of success and elegance. He always, in tailored suits, spoke of discipline and vision. She, discreet and gentle, was described as the soul behind the empire. In the first few months, life seemed perfect. The days began with the aroma of fresh coffee and ended with soft laughter to the sound of rain. Ji-won promised the world, said they would build something eternal. Se-ra believed him. She saw in him the reflection of everything that love should be: protection, security, and admiration. But little by little, the brilliance of his words began to fade. The man who once held her hand tenderly began to treat it like a decorative piece. At corporate dinners, she was presented with the same airs used to display a trophy. When she smiled too much, he corrected her with a look. When she spoke, he subtly interrupted. "You don't need to give your opinion, Se-ra. Just being present is enough," he would say in public, with a polished smile that concealed the steel beneath the surface. The mansion, once a home, had become a stage where silence weighed more than any argument. The cold walls reflected the echo of a relationship built on appearances. Ji-won tolerated no imperfections, neither at work nor in his wife. She began to measure her words, control her gestures, and hide her tears behind closed doors. Even so, she kept trying. She prepared dinners, left affectionate notes, waited for a glance that never came. Until one day, upon entering his office, she found a pile of photos. From events and trips she had never been to, unfamiliar faces, fake smiles, and in the center of one of the images, an elegant woman. "This is Mira." With his eyes fixed on Ji-won, in a way no wife should ever witness. It was at that moment that something broke inside her. It wasn't love, but the hope of being loved. From then on, Sarah learned to live between appearances and silence, pretending not to see what hurt too much to be said. And while he believed he had every detail of life around him, under control, fate merely watched, patient, cold, waiting for the exact moment when the mask would begin to crack. Because before the fire consumed everything, something far more dangerous had already begun to burn, the truth he tried to hide within his own home. Time passed like an invisible blade, silently cutting away everything that remained between them. The love that once warmed spring mornings had transformed into an endless winter. Han Ji-won. He no longer saw his wife. He saw a shadow, an uncomfortable reminder of the past that distracted him from his business. With each new contract signed, with each award received, something inside him hardened. And what was once complicity became meticulous and impersonal routine. At breakfast, the sound of clinking porcelain was the only dialogue that persisted. Sarah, always punctual and serene, tried to break the silence with simple gestures. A cup of coffee served, a question about the day, a smile that sought to revive what time had frozen. But Ji-won responded with indifference, engrossed in reports and corporate messages. When she mentioned something from the heart, he would only look up to correct her. "Don't use that tone. You're becoming too emotional." The nights, once filled with conversation and music, became long absences. Ji-won spent increasingly more time traveling, and when she returned, she brought perfumes that weren't hers. The servants noticed the distance, but no one dared to comment. In that home, fear had become the new etiquette. Once, during a dinner with shareholders, Sarah tried to make a discreet remark about a company charity project. Ji-won interrupted her in front of everyone, smiling falsely. "Leave the serious matters to those who understand, dear." The entire room laughed, and she swallowed her embarrassment with a toast that burned her throat more than any wine. When they returned home, he didn't even notice the empty look he left behind. The following days were marked by absolute silence. Sarah began to walk alone through the gardens, touching the flowers as if saying goodbye to something that would not return. Ji-won, in turn, immersed himself in work and appearances. Success surrounded him, but human warmth abandoned him. And the higher he climbed, the colder he became. Deep down, he believed he was winning. He believed that control was proof of strength. But something imperceptible was beginning to crumble within his own walls. Disdain was turning into blindness, and blindness into error. He no longer saw the danger growing in his own shadow. One night, while reviewing documents in the office, Ji-won received an anonymous message. "Do you think you can hide everything forever?" He frowned, annoyed, and deleted the text, thinking it was just a provocation. But his hands trembled slightly as he returned to the keyboard. Outside, Sarah watched through the window, his reflection in the cold office light. A distant man, surrounded by victories that tasted like poison. And it was in that distance that destiny found space to act. Because when love fades, the next glimmer that appears rarely comes from the light. The chasm between Han Ji-won and Yoon Se-ra was already too deep when the first real crack opened. She, accustomed to living amidst rehearsed smiles and promises that sounded like contracts, began to realize that her husband's empire wasn't sustained by genius, but by secrets disguised as strategy. One grey morning, while organizing documents, in the library, an envelope slipped from behind the shelf and fell at his feet. Upon opening it, he found forged contracts, records of non-existent donations, and a multi-million-dollar transfer made in his name to an account in the Cayman Islands. For a moment, time stood still. The paper trembled in his hands, and the world she thought she knew collapsed in absolute silence. The truth was cruel. Ji-won was using his wife's identity to mask financial crimes. Se-ra's pure name was the perfect facade to hide an empire built on fraud. When he arrived home that night, the expensive perfume did nothing to disguise the ingrained corruption. She awaited him on the sofa, the documents on the table, courage throbbing in her chest. "Why is my name on these contracts?" she asked in a serene but firm voice. He, after a brief spasm of surprise, replied with the coldness of someone who no longer fears love. "You wouldn't understand. This is just business." "Business," Se-ra repeated with tears held back. "Business is using me as a shield." His answer was a sentence, "Everything you have is because I allowed it." The phrase pierced her soul like fire. In that instant, fear switched sides. He began to fear what she might do, and no longer the other way around. In the following days, Ji-won became a calculating shadow. With the help of his lover, Seo Mira, he planned to turn danger into silence. And on a rainy night, his fate was sealed. The fire he lit didn't just destroy a house. It burned away his last chance at redemption. But fate has its own form of justice, and when the ashes begin to speak, who will believe the man who wept so perfectly? The fire had died down, but the echo of the flames still burned within her. Yoon Se-ra awoke enveloped in a cold white light, breathing the heavy air of antiseptic and metal. Everything around her seemed too clean, too calm, as if the hospital were trying to erase the traces of hell that had brought her there. She tried to move, but the pain tore through her entire body, and a groan escaped her throat. The nurse approached quickly, murmuring words of comfort that sounded distant. "You're alive. Alive." The word echoed like a cruel irony. Between fragmented memories and the lingering smell of ashes, she only recalled his voice, Ji-won, calling her name amidst the crackling flames. The doctor said she'd been found unconscious by a truck driver in the Gangwon Mountains, covered in mud and almost without a pulse, with a melted wedding ring still clinging to her finger. Everyone called it a miracle, but Se-ra knew it wasn't luck. It was a promise made to the ashes. He wouldn't erase his truth. The following days turned into a cycle of pain and silence. The scars on her body were small compared to the wound that had taken hold in her soul. She wept softly, not for the scarred skin, but for the love that had condemned her. When the news showed Ji-won, the man who had burned her, being praised as an exemplary widower, something inside her died completely. The tears dried up, and her sweet gaze gave way to a resolute coldness. She refused to return to Seoul. She took refuge in the countryside, where the wind seemed to know the sound of a new beginning. She learned to walk, to breathe, to exist without fear. Each scar became a reminder. She survived what no one should. And on a calm night, while watching the moon's reflection on the lake, he silently promised, "One day he will see that even ashes have a voice." But fate, patient and relentless, was already beginning to prepare the echo of that promise, because the truth, when it survives the fire, returns to burn the guilty. The following years seemed like a long disguise. Han Ji-won, he rebuilt his life with the calculated precision of someone who manipulates destiny like a financial balance sheet. Tragedy had transformed him into a national symbol of overcoming adversity. Magazines called him a resilient man. Investors treated him as an example of emotional strength. By his side, a new woman, this is Mira, the former aide who had become her confidant, smiled in interviews, staging the perfect version of happiness. The mansion was rebuilt from scratch, more modern, colder. Every wall reflected the obsessive control Ji-won exerted over everything, employees, press, image. But when the lights went out and silence took over the house, the ghosts came. Sometimes he would wake up sweating, certain he had heard footsteps in the hallway. Other times, he would smell smoke even without any fire. I was looking for explanations, but the terror came from within. The past, however buried it might be, had begun to breathe. Meanwhile, miles away, Sera's law. He was living under a new name, Han Yun-ji. Shorter hair, a serene gaze, a gentle voice that now carried firmness. She worked discreetly at a foundation for victims of tragedies. She had become a calm, almost invisible presence, but her mind was a sharp mirror. She had learned to observe the suffering of others without letting her own emerge. Each story of pain she heard reminded her of the reason she was still breathing, the justice that the fire did not consume. In Seoul, Ji-won's businesses were thriving, but something in the balance began to falter. One of Hanul Group's projects faced an environmental complaint. Headlines hinted at corruption, but no concrete evidence linked him to the case. Still, panic gnawed at him, not out of fear of losing his empire, but of seeing his image tarnished, the very altar where he had sacrificed everything, including love. Mira tried to comfort him, but the glint in her eyes wasn't one of loyalty, but rather of greed. Ji-won was too blind to see it. One night, during a charity event, he looked at the audience and for a moment saw a face in the crowd. The gaze was familiar, so penetrating that it made his heart stop. The figure vanished quickly like a reflection. He laughed nervously, trying to convince himself. It was just tiredness. But something inside him murmured otherwise. What if it wasn't imagination? The nights grew long again. Ji-won began to drink, losing control over his speeches and meetings. His reputation remained intact for now, but the man behind it was beginning to crumble. Every toast, every smile sounded hollow. And while he silently crumbled unknowingly, a shadow from the past rose on the other side of the country, ready to approach step by step. Because some falls don't happen suddenly. They are built slowly, until the guilty party begins to hear, in the depths of their own silence, the sound of the fire breathing again. 5 years had passed since the fire. The name Han Ji-won continued to be splashed across the covers of financial magazines, but beneath the glare of the headlines, the structure was beginning to creak. The empire he believed immune was now being corroded by something invisible. Not bankruptcy, but the return of what he had tried to bury. It all started with a forgotten news report on an independent website. The headline read, "Hanul Foundation, accused of concealing donations for fire victims." The author, a young reporter named Kang Do-jun. The article presented documents that contradicted the CEO's public statements. The detail that no one noticed, except Ji-won, was the date. The irregularities coincided with the year of the fire. Upon seeing the headline, his heart raced. His hands sweated. The past was returning, disguised as news. On the other side of the country, Sera's law, now known as Han Yun-ji, watched the same news report. The name Hanul appeared on the screen like an old wound that never healed. She froze for a moment, feeling her breath catch in her chest. She had unknowingly awaited this moment, the first sign that the truth was beginning to surface. Determined, she sought out the journalist. She found him in a small cafe near the Gangneung train station. He was surprised to see her, a woman of calm demeanor, with a gaze too firm for an ordinary person. They sat in silence until she said, "The story you want to tell isn't about donations. It's about fire." Do-jun's eyes widened, and at that moment, without revealing her real name, she handed him a small metal box. Inside were copies of the original documents from that time, records that had miraculously survived the flames. The reporter felt the weight of it. He asked who she was. Sarah smiled slightly. Someone that fate forgot to erase. She didn't ask for money nor recognition. He asked for only one thing: time. Don't post yet. Let me prepare the rest. When the time is right, everything will come to light. From then on, the game began in silence. Sarah returned to Seoul under a new identity, rented a small apartment, and resumed contact with Min Hye-jin, the lawyer who had once promised to help her. Together, they began reviewing old files, tracing accounts, connecting the dots. Each discovery was a flame rekindling. Slow, but relentless. Meanwhile, Ji-won tried to deny the news, intimidate journalists and manipulate the market, but nothing seemed to contain the growing unease. The public didn't know it, but the eyes of fate were already watching him closely, and each of his moves only tightened the invisible noose that would one day suffocate him. One early morning, while reviewing reports, Ji-won realized something. Someone was accessing confidential company files. The login used a name he never expected to see. Again, Yoon-ji. For a moment, his heart stopped. The glass fell from his hand, shattering on the floor. He tried to believe it was a coincidence, but the coincidence had eyes, a voice, and scars. And before she could react, the clock marked the beginning of a new cycle. Because revenge doesn't come with screams, she arrives with the same silence with which the guilty party believed they had won. The Hanyul Empire, once a symbol of stability and national pride, began to fragment from within. Reports didn't add up, contracts disappeared, and rumors of corruption echoed behind the scenes. But what truly disturbed them was, Hanji won it wasn't the numbers. It was the invisible gaze that seemed to watch him wherever he went. It all started with small coincidences. An unreturned letter was left on his desk, an old photograph of the mansion taken on the night of the fire. On the back, a handwritten phrase, "Nothing that fire touches fails to speak." Ji-won froze. The paper trembled in his hands. He called his security guards, demanded cameras, but no one had seen anything. His heart pounded erratically, and the feeling of control, his greatest virtue, began to crumble. The next day, a story appeared on an international website, linking his name to embezzlement and document forgery. Hanul's stock plummeted. Mi-ra, his lover and now silent partner, reacted with despair. "You need to listen to me, Ji-won. This is no coincidence. Someone is hunting you," he responded coldly, trying to hide his panic. "No one dares to confront me." But that night, as he entered the house, he noticed the familiar smell of smoke. Nothing was burning, and yet the odor persisted. He closed the windows, turned off the lights, but the smell remained. It was as if the fire had returned, just for him. Meanwhile, in a discreet cafe in Seoul, Sarah's Lawan Min Hye-jin, they watched everything through the screens. The revenge wasn't revenge, it was justice. Every news story, every stock market crash was part of a meticulously calculated plan. "He will destroy himself," said Sarah, her voice low and firm. "And when the moment comes, he will know that it was never destiny. It was you." Ji-won's days became a labyrinth of paranoia. He avoided mirrors, seeing the reflection of something that wasn't there. People seemed to whisper when he passed by. The success that once crowned him now strangled him. He slept little, his face marked by dark circles and red eyes. In meetings, he lost his temper. He called the directors traitors, shouted and broke glasses, until one day he received an anonymous email with a link. Upon opening it, he found a video, images of the house in flames, the same ones the firefighters had recorded 5 years earlier. But there was something new. In the background of the audio, a distorted voice repeated, "You couldn't erase me." Desperation replaced control. Ji-won locked himself in the office, destroying screens and tearing up papers. Mi-ra, frightened, fled, taking documents and money with her. And that same day, a reporter published that an anonymous witness was about to reveal secrets about the Han case. For the first time, the man who believed he had the world in his hands felt fear. Not of losing everything, but of seeing what fate had decided to give back to him. And when night fell over Seoul, he looked out the window and saw, reflected in the glass, a female silhouette standing in the street, motionless, serene, silently. Watching him, the fire, at last, had found its way back. The morning that would mark the beginning of the end seemed ordinary. The sun streamed through the windows of Unveiled Group's headquarters, reflecting off the marble corridors and the hurried movements of executives trying to contain the crisis. Han Ji-won. He had arrived earlier than usual. Sunken eyes, trembling hands, short breath. He tried to appear calm, but each step echoed like the harbinger of a verdict. In that same building, discreetly, a woman crossed the lobby. She wore a simple black suit, had short hair, and a firm posture. None of the employees recognized her, but everyone looked away. There was something about her presence that commanded respect and silence. The sound of her heels on the cold floor seemed rhythmic, almost hypnotic. It was Sera's law, or, for the modern world, Han Yeonji. 5 years of absence had transformed her pain into strength. The scars that marked her body were no longer wounds, but medals. The fire had molded her, fear trained her, and love buried her. She wasn't coming to seek forgiveness. She was coming to seek balance, the return of what fate had promised her when it gave her the chance to live. She climbed to the top floor with slow steps. The secretary announced an extraordinary meeting of the board of shareholders, and minutes later, the main hall was filled with cameras, reporters, and investors. Not center, Han Ji-won. He adjusted his tie, trying to regain his composure. He didn't know that at that very moment, the past was walking through the door. When Sera entered, the world seemed to fall silent. For a brief second, no one breathed. Ji-won saw her, and time seemed to break. The glass fell from his hand, shattering on the floor, while his gaze filled with something he had never felt before, genuine dread. "Good afternoon," she said calmly. "I am Han Yeonji, representative of the Fire Victims Foundation." The voice was different, mature, but unmistakable. Ji-won took a step back, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. The shareholders watched her, confused. Some whispered about the resemblance. Others stared at her as if seeing a ghost. But Sera kept her gaze fixed on him, serene, penetrating, cruel in its tranquility. "I am here to present the evidence linking Unveiled Group to the donation fraud." With each word, Ji-won felt her blood run cold. She tried to interrupt her, but her voice failed her. She continued, opening. The folder on the table, contracts, images, reports. These documents were recovered after the fire at Han Ji-won's former residence. Curiously, the same fire that took his wife's life. The murmurs grew louder. "But there's something you gentlemen don't know," she said, pausing deliberately. "His wife survived." The silence that followed was almost religious. Ji-won stood up, pale, unable to utter a single word. Sera approached slowly, her scars on display, her gaze as firm as a sentence. "You tried to erase everything that threatened you, Ji-won, but fate cannot erase with fire what has been written with truth." Cameras captured every second. Journalists frantically took notes. He took a step back, trembling. "This is impossible. You're dead." She tilted her head slightly. Sometimes hell gives back what it doesn't accept. The atmosphere turned chaotic. Reporters surged forward. Security guards tried to contain the crowd. Ji-won stumbled out, dazed, while Sera remained. Motionless, cold, impassive, like the very personification of karma. Outside the building, the sky was beginning to change color. Clouds were closing in over Seoul, and the wind carried the same smell of rain from that distant night. It was a sign that something much bigger was about to fall, because Se-Ra's return was not the end. It was only the beginning of the truth, burning for all to see. Chaos had taken over the Hanul Group headquarters. Cameras, shouts, flashes, everything mixed together in a whirlwind of voices and lights. In the center, Han Ji-won, he trembled, trying to comprehend how the impossible had become real. The woman he believed he had extinguished with fire was now alive, before everyone, revealing what he had spent years trying to hide. Se-Ra's law serene, she held the folder of evidence as if she held destiny in her own hands. Her gaze did not express hatred, but a calmness that was more devastating than any scream. "For years," she began, her firm voice echoing through the room, "this man built his fortune on lies, destroyed lives, and tried to burn the truth with the same fire that consumed his home." She opened a USB drive and connected it to the auditorium screen. The image of the fire appeared in high resolution. Previously unseen footage, restored by forensic experts, the flames moved slowly, revealing more than just destruction, revealed intention. The recording showed Ji-won in the backyard, watching the house catch fire even before the firefighters arrived. The security camera left unattended on the property had captured every second, the lighter in his hand, his cold stare, and the final gesture of closing the gate. A murmur of horror swept through the room. The journalists stood up, microphones advanced, and the world for a moment seemed to stop. Ji-won staggered back, pale. He tried to speak, but the words choked in his throat. "This is a setup. It's a trap." Se-Ra approached, keeping her gaze steady. "The only trap was the one you built for yourself." The sound of the recording filled the air, the crackling of flames, the distant sound of her crying. It was the echo of her own guilt returning as a sentence. Suddenly, one of the shareholders stood up, furious. "You deceived us. You used the company's name to cover up a murder." The cameras turned to Ji-won. The man who once inspired respect now seemed small, surrounded, stripped of any power. The press bombarded him with questions. The flashes blinded him. With each click, his public image burned faster than the house he had set on fire. Se-Ra took a deep breath, stepped back, and said in a low voice, "Now the fire is yours, Ji-won, and I only came to watch." He tried to run, but the security guards stopped him. The ground seemed to spin. As he was led outside, the glass doors reflected his own image, his rumpled suit, empty eyes, and sweaty face. For the first time, he saw himself as he truly was, a man consumed by the very hell he had created. Outside, the rain began to fall, fine, cold, purifying. And amidst the sound of sirens and the flashes of the press, Se-Ra's voice echoed like a premonition. No lie can survive the test of time. But fate had not yet finished its reckoning. There was something else waiting for him, something that even hell itself had not yet shown. The courtroom doors slammed shut with a dry sound, as if fate itself had brought it to a close. The trial of Han Ji-won was broadcast nationwide. Executives, politicians, and citizens watched in disbelief as the man who, for years, had symbolized power and success fell. His once impeccable image was now that of a prisoner in a grey uniform, handcuffed and bent over under the weight of his own lies. During the hearings, he spoke very little. He stared fixedly at the table, avoiding eye contact. Se-Ra's law, who had been following the proceedings from a distance, in silence. When the judge read the sentence, 25 years in prison for fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder, The courtroom fell silent. Not a single tear fell. No cries echoed. The punishment did not come with violence, but with the absolute silence that follows shame. Inside the cell, Ji-won lost all sense of time. The days blended together with the metallic sound of the bars and the echo of the guards' distant voices. There was no more suit, watch, or status. Only the sound of his own heart, beating irregularly, reminding him that he was still alive enough to feel the weight of regret. Sometimes he would wake up screaming, gripped by nightmares in which he saw the house in flames again, but this time he was trapped inside. Other times, he would see Se-ra standing amidst the flames, staring at him without saying a word. On those nights, he trembled so much that the other prisoners called him the fireman. The following days became a punishment more profound than any court sentence: oblivion. The shareholders abandoned him, the companies were dissolved, and Mira, his accomplice, was found lifeless in a hotel room, taking with her the last evidence that could further incriminate his name. The once feared Hanul Empire had become synonymous with national shame. Ji-won was trying to write letters to Se-ra. At first, they were long, full of justifications and pleas for forgiveness. Over time, they became short and confused, until one day he stopped. No one answered, and perhaps that was for the best. With each letter, he realized that no words could erase what the fire had revealed. One afternoon, sitting near the barred window, he watched the rain fall on the prison courtyard. The drops slid down the iron, reflecting the same glow as the fire he had once lit. For the first time, he understood that hell is not a place, it is the echo of one's own actions. And in that heavy silence, he murmured in a hoarse voice, "It wasn't the fire that destroyed me. I was the one who lit it from within." The guard called him by his number, not his name. Ji-won stood up slowly, his gaze distant, his shoulders hunched. On the other side of the bars, the rain continued to fall, calm, steady, as if washing away the ashes of the past. But as he walked down the damp corridor, something made him stop. Outside, in the shadows, a woman with a black umbrella watched him silently. He blinked, confused. When he looked again, she was no longer there. And for the first time in years, a shiver ran through his body, as if the fire had not yet gone out. Time, relentless and patient, restored to the city the silence that the scandal had snatched away. The headlines faded, the voices ceased, and all that remained was the distant echo of a story that seemed to have happened in another world. Se-ra's law. Now far from the spotlight and cameras, she lived in a small village in the Gangwon countryside, surrounded by mountains and the constant sound of the wind rustling through the pine trees. Life had become simple again, not empty, but full of a serenity that only those who have faced hell can understand. Every morning, she walked through the gate of the local orphanage where she volunteered. The children ran up to her, calling her Teacher Han. None of them knew the past of the woman with the calm gaze and subtle scars. To them, she was simply the lady who knew how to transform sadness into hope. In each child's smile, Se-ra found the solace that the world had denied her. One afternoon, one of the girls asked her, "Do your scars still hurt?" Se-ra smiled, crouched down to the child's level and replied, "Only when I forget that I survived." The girl nodded, hugging her tightly, and in that simple gesture, something inside her finally calmed down. Pain, after years, had transformed into wisdom. In the quiet hours of dusk, Se-ra used to sit by the lake, watching the golden reflection of the sun on the calm waters. The wind blew gently, and sometimes she would close her eyes, smelling the distant scent of rain. It was no longer the smell of the fire, but the fragrance of life beginning anew. He picked up the old diary and opened it to the last blank page. He wrote in firm handwriting, "The fire tried to destroy me, but I learned that it only reveals what is true." At that moment, fate seemed to restore her peace. Jiwon was serving his sentence far away, and she no longer desired revenge. There was no longer any need. The true punishment is living with the echo of one's own mistake, and he already heard that every day. Sarah simply raised her gaze to the sky and murmured, "Forgiving is not forgetting. It is letting time extinguish what fire could not." The sun began to set behind the mountains, tinging the horizon with red and gold. The last rays of daylight reflected on the lake's waters like small, serene flames, not of destruction, but of rebirth. And in that moment, the cycle was complete. The fire that once consumed now illuminated. The imaginary camera slowly pulls back, leaving Sarah enveloped by the tranquil landscape, while the narration concludes with a soft, reflective voice. Some stories end in ashes, others are reborn from them, because destiny may take its time, but it never forgets. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel to continue following intense narratives like this one, stories about love, guilt, forgiveness, and rebirth. Each episode here is a reminder that no matter how much the fire destroys, there is always something that survives the flames: the truth.